that if anyone wants to contribute, ask a question or speak, please do. So we don't have to wait till the end of the gathering. When you feel something, put your hand on your heart. Instead of saying, please call on me, just put your hand on your heart and then you ask the heart to speak.
Jazakallah khair. It's an honor to be with you all and be with Sheikha Maryam and be able to talk about this topic together that the two of us have spoken a lot about, because we have found that our journeys have been very parallel in our own journeying physically in the world, traveling, and the journey internally of our spiritual journey has been very parallel and very sort of inspirational in finding that there is this unification of this purpose and this spiritual journey that everybody is on. And what I would like to sort of offer, to just building on what Sheikha Maryam was talking about, is this journey. When we say step by step, it's not step by step towards something out there. It's not a journey towards a destination that is anywhere other than right here. So oftentimes we have this orientation to journeying as if we are future oriented. When we think of a journey, we think we're trying to travel to somewhere else, right? And when we think in this way, it's because of our limitation and our orientation to the physical realm, this temporal dunya world, where we experience ourselves as separate from everything else, and we experience time and space in this linear fashion, right? So when you think of a journey, you think you're going to start at point A and end up at point B. And it's this line, right? And it's interesting talking about Hajj is all circular, and circles and lines. So if you think of the Hajar running between Safa and Marwa, this is a linear line. And she's running in the dunya frantically, sort of trying to make sense of the difficulty and the trial and the struggle of how am I going to take care of my son? How am I going to take care of my things? And it's this back and forth of this line. So it's the back and forth is, okay, maybe I go over here. Nope, it's not over there. Maybe I go over here. Nope, it's not over there. This is the nature of the dunya because it's limited and it's linear, and that linear reality is an illusion. It's how we perceive this dimension. But then when she remembers Allah and stays in one point and says, okay, I have to transcend this dunya experience of trying to make sense of this linear running back and forth, and transcend that Allah is the one that is going to be the one that's going to bring forth from the place that I am, where I can't see anything else, the answers come, right? The Zamzam spring gushes forth out of nowhere in the presence, when we become present. And then the Hajj has this circle. We make tawaf around the Kaaba, and it's this circular motion. And what we're doing is we're circling around this Kaaba, and that Kaaba also has a line that now we know is aligned exactly with the star that is in the center of the universe. And so it's this vertical and horizontal axis point of location where we come into knowing Allah and come to witnessing Allah. And what is inside the Kaaba? It's nothing, right? It's empty. And so we were saying that the Sheikh was saying that the Kaaba is like our qalb, is our heart. And so where are we journeying to? We're journeying into our heart, because our heart is the place where we can locate ourselves in time and space, in the spiritual and the physical realm, to be in witnessing of Allah. And so really, when we're journeying to the Kaaba and getting on a plane or getting on a camel and traveling to this place, we need to do this as a reminder in the world, and we need our body and our will and our conscious awareness to invoke that journey physically, but so that we can remind ourselves of this internal journey that we're always a part of. And so if we look at it this way, the step by step is the step in and of itself is the destination. It's not looking to where we need to go toward, because oftentimes we get stuck on this linear dimension. I am where I am and I need to be somewhere else. Either I need to become a doctor because my parents have made this pressure on me, and that's the only way I'm going to find my worth, is if I'm somewhere else and I have become something else. Or I'm not a good enough Muslim currently, I'm not doing everything I can, and so we put it on, well, someday I'll get to the place where I need to be, and it's over there. So I'm on this journey step by step to get to my goal. And this is a paradox, because we do need to strive to be better. We need to strive to be more, not a better doctor necessarily, but a better Muslim, a better human being, a better version of ourselves. But the only way that we can actually do that is by being present in the place that we are right now. So the step by step is really important if you think about it. Why? Because that's saying slow down and focus on the step that you're at now first. Because as soon as you're thinking about the next step, you've taken yourself out of the place where you can actually witness Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Allah only exists in this current reality. The future, when we start thinking about the future, it's a figment of our imagination. It's something that we've made up. Because when you get to the future, where will you be? You'll be in the present. It's not something that exists, right? And the past, we often live in the past, but this isn't a reality either. It doesn't exist. The only thing, because when you were experiencing what you're thinking about in the past, when was it? It was the present. It's always the present.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we need to do is be focusing on the step and being in that step only. But then the step by step is meaning that you're constantly on this journey, so that you don't stop and get complacent. When we stop and we stay with what is around us, we submit to the illusion of separation. And then we become deluded with this linear journey. And our whole focus becomes on who am I as a separate individual, and how do I be who I think I am, and how do I achieve what I want to achieve. And we're following our own self-direction in this journey. And it's based in this identification with ana, with the I, with my self-identification and self-direction. And so if I believe, well, if I have my 5-year plan of what I want to be in life and do these things, and now I'm going to dedicate myself to achieve this 5-year plan. What I have to do in order to achieve that is think, okay, I've determined what's best for me. Now I've determined how I'm going to get there, and I'm believing that it's me that's going to manifest all these things that are going to get me to what I have determined is good. And what do you have to do to live like that? You have to be completely focused on self-agency, self-direction, and self-identification. But the journey in Islam is about submitting yourself to Allah and recognizing that your identity, your purpose is simply to be a servant of Allah. And our job is to, with this will that we've been given, because we do have a will and we have the tendency to think of planning and directing, but our job is to constantly submit our will to the will of Allah. And we have to do this constantly because we keep forgetting. We keep staying with the separation. We keep staying with the linear journey, right? Most of us probably today, this week, earlier today, most of your time was probably spent managing the dunya, right? And managing your identity in the dunya, either who you think you are, where you're going, how other people perceive you, what are you going to do, what's your responsibility, and you're thinking either in the future or the past. You're either in anxiety or regret. And what that does is it keeps you out of the place to be able to just be following the signs. Because if we've determined that the only reality, the only place of being and witnessing the reality of Allah is in the moment, then the only place that you can read the signs on the horizon is by being awake to the moment, because that's where they're showing up. But if we're so focused on the destination of the journey and not the journey itself, we miss the signs. And then we're pursuing what we have determined, our self-direction. And I can tell you from my own personal experience that never gets me the right place. I have all kinds of things that theoretically sound like they would be great for me. And maybe they were great for other people. But I don't know what's best for me. Even if it's the best, we can determine what's the best thing to do in the world. What's the best profession? Where's the best city to live? What is the best thing to do? There is no determination of that, because the best thing for you to do is what Allah has for you to do. The only way that we can live by that and find that out is by just submitting to Allah and waiting to see where the breadcrumbs lead you. So the journey unfolds as you walk on step by step. And so as you're taking each step, you have to fully be with that step and be present and looking around so that you know where's the next step. And the only way you can know where the next step is by being present, by being witness to Allah, and being awake to be able to read the signs. And then the big thing here is then to submit to what opens to you. And this is a very difficult thing to do in the way that we tend to live lives these days. Because we have, in contemporary society, we don't find many places where this sacred journey is a reality, and we are constantly reminded of what we need to do to be responsible, and what we need to do to be good, or we need to do to, right? And so we create all these boundaries for ourselves, and we tend to stay in what is familiar environment, which then just sort of keeps us comfortable. And so what Sheikha Maryam and I found on our own journeys is that our physical traveling in the world was fundamental to breaking down this notion of self. Because when you travel and you don't have a plan, like you don't have an itinerary for your travel, but you're just sort of walking the earth, you have to get outside of your comfort zone. You can't keep things around you that are comfortable, that you've managed to determine that, okay, I'm okay with this. You have all these people that don't know anything of you, so they have no expectations of you. So you're not stuck in meeting other people's expectations. You get to be who you are now in the moment, because the reality is who you were last year or who you were last week is a different creation than who you are now. Allah is Rabb al-Alameen. Rabb means the one who brings forth and sustains and continues to sustain his creation. And so the only way that you can really live in witness of the Rabb is by being Ibn al-Waqt, the son of the moment, son or daughter of the moment. And that means witnessing the reality of Allah now. Now it's past, now you're witnessing it again. Now you're witnessing it again. So as soon as you get out of a state of dhikr, of remembrance, then you are in ghafla. You're in forgetfulness of that reality that's unfolding, and then you get off the journey, right? So what we need to do is we stay focused on this journey of struggling, and we have to do it in a way that is unconventional to this world. We have to live as if we're sort of strangers in this world, because this is not our home. And oftentimes we live life where we're trying to set up shop here, trying to make things as comfortable as possible, get the best job, get the best family, get to find the perfect house in the perfect neighborhood. And this is me now. I identify with this house and my things that I've decorated my house with. And we're building our home in dunya. But this is not where we need to be staying, because it's like building your house on quicksand. This place is temporary, it's falling. And so we need to be doing the work to establish ourselves in our hearts and with Allah. And then it doesn't matter where we are. Wherever we are, we're at home. And so how do we do that? This idea of journaling the journey is the tool that we have, whether it's writing a journal but the idea is taking account of the self. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran swears by the nafs al-lawama. Nafs al-lawama is the state of the human being when it's taking itself into account. This is the fundamental fulcrum and mechanism by which we stay in this journey. Stay step by step is by staying engaged in the reflection and the taking account of the self. And this is being a murabit. The murabitun are those who are mounted and ready for battle. And it's the battle is the jihad al-akbar. The greater battle is in our soul. And so you're always on the battlefield. And that means that you're ready, you're awake, and you're ready to constantly be working through the trials and tribulations of the world and the covering over of your heart, so that you can wake up and stay in a state of remembrance. And that means having self-awareness every moment, being awake to the moment, Ibn al-Waqt. And that means you're staying conscious, you're staying in dhikr. Every breath becomes a remembrance. And so the journaling, the idea of taking account, is this process by how we become a murabit. So Imam al-Ghazali talks about the murabitun and the path of murabata of these. He talks about the six memes or 6 M's. And I won't go through all of them, but the important two are muraqaba and muhasaba. Muraqaba, we often hear this word muraqaba like as it's synonymous with meditation. but really it means to witness the self or watch the self. And that means being present and looking inward and witnessing the Kaaba in your heart, being present to your heart and being able to take account of what's happening there. Am I slipping? Am I forgetting? Am I focusing on the future or the past? Is the what's coming up that's getting in the way? What's there that's other than Allah? So just like the Prophet ﷺ took all of the idols out of the Kaaba, this is what we need to do in our heart. We need to take everything that's other than Allah out of our heart. The only way we can do that is by being in the state of nafs al-muraqabah. The nafs in a state of witnessing and watching itself. Like a cat, when it's waiting for a mouse outside of a mouse hole, it's fully present, right? Because if it looks away for a minute, the mouse will go away. So it's like completely focused on the moment. And so this is what we want to train ourselves to learn how to be present, so muraqabah, so the idea is when we can do this in a practice, and we'll do this today, maybe in a minute here if we have time, practicing being present in the heart. And then once you're able to use this muscle of muraqabah, then you want to breathe that into your daily life so that you're watching yourself as you live life. Because what happens is when we become asleep, we're sort of sleepwalking, we react to life and we don't even realize that we have these things coming up in our heart. And then we react to them. And maybe somebody says something that hurts us and we react and say something hurtful back to them, or we have this reaction and we don't even realize it, we're not conscious. But if you watch yourself while you're in life, then you say, oh, what just happened? That person said this thing and I reacted, something came into my heart and my state changed, my how changed, and so what is that? What does that mean? What do I need to pay attention to? What do I need to clean out of the Kaaba of my heart? Right? What's the thing that I need to remove? But the only way you can do that is if you're present, witness to it. And then once you've witnessed it in this muraqabah, then you do muhasabah. You journal it. It can be, so this is, muhasabah is self-reflection and taking account. So that means, Ghazali said it's like a bookkeeper, an accountant who does the bookkeeping at the end of each day. And you're tallying up, okay, what did I do? And he says that you should take yourself into account before you're taken into account. Because Sheikh Nuruddin used to say, pay now, or so you don't have to pay later. Better that you pay now, meaning you take yourself into account now because you can fix it and you can move through it easier. Whereas if it's in Akhirah and those books are sealed, then it's a much bigger problem. So better that you take yourself into account each day. And so you can literally do it in a journal. You write down, okay, today this happened and I noticed my reaction was like this. And what does that mean? And so you're sort of tracking yourself and tracking your awareness so that you are not wasting your time here. We're here to be on this journey, and this journey is uncovering to what we already have inside us, which is this ruh that witnesses. And we just need to stay active in opening to it. And so when she says journaling the journey, it's helping you stay awake to this process of movement and continuing to be in this struggle. They say, fi haraka baraka. In movement, there's blessing. You're keeping moving on this journey so that the openings keep coming and you don't get stagnant and calcified in your heart.
Just a question about journaling, because we were talking about this earlier before, to like not staying in your head but staying in your heart. But I think journaling sometimes is like
Heady.
like
Yeah.
talk therapy, CBT thing of like how do you really like tips of like how to like really be like in your heart or more open or like with Allah when you're also in the process of like thinking about tangible things like thoughts, behaviors, actions, things like that.
So what I want to do is you do both. So you spend time just being present, without paper, without pen, and just witnessing and taking account by witnessing. And then you go and you do need to use your akal, your cognitive function, because that's part of your faculty as a human being. And it's part of your experience of being separate. There's a part of your heart that is transcendent and beyond the separation. And that heart knows and can see things as they are and intuits. But you still have to live in your separate self. You have to integrate these things. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to teach your akal reigns in your nafs, but also you have to use your akal, your intellect, to rein in your akal even. Like you're training yourself to think self-reflectively. And so it's actually important that you integrate the experiential reflection with the rational, contemplative, cognitive function. So it's okay that you do shift gears a bit. The idea is if you do it like at first, if they seem so separate because you're not used to using both these faculties, you just have to go back and forth until you integrate and see them as one. Because they are, and eventually you'll be able to write while you're staying present with your heart. But it's okay if that doesn't come naturally at first. It takes practice. Yeah.
Something that I've experienced quite often while writing is that I'm not writing.
It's just coming out.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Very, very much so. It simply appeared, the words appeared on the page.
Yeah.
And that is, I'm reading the book.
Yeah. And so you are completely present in your heart, and it's just coming through the pen.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and I think, do you find that it was always like that for you, or was there a time that you got to this place where you could be integrated like that?
In a certain way, from the very early days, there's an awareness that something else is happening and you're not doing it.
Yeah.
That it's a transmission. There's a sense of this throughout my
Coming
life.
through you.
I've seen that transmission
Yeah.
taking place. And it's not that you thought the thoughts that you are writing down, but you are beholding the wonder of the transmission.
Right. And this is like any real true artist in a creative process. Like think of the jazz musician. The jazz musician studies rudiments and like tick 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 tick, and it's like the science of music, right? And then when they're in the jazz club, all that goes in the back, and they're not sitting there and thinking of mathematical musical things. They just let go and it comes through. That's the only time when it actually sounds good and makes sense musically, right?
Yes.
And so the same thing, you have to practice these tools, and then they become tools so that you can they get used rather than you using them, right? And then it will flow. And it's important that you write with your hand. I know people use their phones. I do that. I take notes on my phone, and it's good, fine. But there's something different about writing with your own hand, because it does flow. My teacher used to make us write books by hand. And so instead of reading it, we'd have to write the whole thing because you learn it differently this way.
I was always taught that there's a connection between the hand and the heart.
Yeah.
And when I was in Yemen and they used to shake hands after prayer, they'd be like, make sure that you touch here because there's a nerve here that connects directly to the heart.
yeah.
And they would shake hands. And it's the same place that the pen rests.
Pen. Beautiful.
I was going to say, Assalamu alaikum,
Alaikum salam.
Alaikum assalam.
as someone who writes every day by pen and paper. There's a connection with the sound of the scratching of the pen on
Yes.
the paper.
Yes.
And that goes along with the movement but then there's the smell of the ink flowing on the paper. And the sound, it intrigues you, and you realize that it's not you. As those of us who write every day, we find ourselves while we're writing, we're not even paying attention to what we write until it's after.
It's like you're reading it yourself for the first time almost with you.
And sometimes you're amazed by that journey that you're talking about, because it is the journey of being present within.
Yes.
Without even acknowledging it. But if you can acknowledge it, how great a benefit that is for you.
Yeah. And then these practices become ibadah, right? It's a vehicle with which you surrender yourself to Allah.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Muhammad. Earlier you mentioned people looking at time as being linear, and it made me think about a hadith the Prophet told Bilal radiallahu anhu that he heard his footsteps in the paradise. And so it kind of blew my mind, because I was thinking about it like Bilal, right, present, alive, how's it that he's hearing his footsteps already in paradise? And it was, kind of explained that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam lived the past, the present, and the future all in one at the same time. It kind of made me think of that. I was thinking about, too, when you were mentioning holding yourself account before the Most High, holds us to account. About Umar radiallahu anhu mentioned that he would take account at the end of every night and make sure that if there was any turmoil between him or someone else, that he would forgive that person in his heart, and kind of, like you said, do some self-reflection and see if there was anything that could be rectified. So when you mentioned writing things down, kind of going and reflecting, it made me. Is it kind of a way of bringing a thought into reality? Like when you write it down, it's a thought, and then you bring it into reality, and then kind of like are able to visually see it and express it in that way.
It can be. I mean, in one sense, you could think, and this is what some people say, like, well, I don't want to bring the thought in reality because it's a thought that's not constructive or good or something, right?
Yeah.
And so what we do is we say, I'm gonna just not bring it up, even though I know it's there. And what this becomes is it's basically suppressing something. So you're basically you're avoiding it. If it's there, what needs to happen is you submit it. It needs to be submitted to Allah. Everything needs to be given back to Allah. And if it's coming up and we're not giving it back to Allah, then it's going to fester and become an illness in some way. And so what we need to do is it's like an exorcism. When you write it out, it's bringing it into reality, but not manifesting it to make it real. It's already real. It's already there. What you're doing is extricating it from inside you, and then you can see, oh, it's out here now. It's no longer in here. But what happens is we're like, well, I'm afraid to give it power. I'm afraid to manifest it, so I'm gonna keep it in here, thinking that the fact that it's in here means it won't be real. It doesn't exist, but it exists has more power by you trying to cage it in, because then it needs to go somewhere. And so it turns into anger. It turns into relationship issues. It turns into lack of faith, right? It has it has to go somewhere. So it becomes muhlikat, like diseases of the heart. And so what we need to do is we need to get it out, but then once it's out and it's exposed, then you have to give it back to Allah. So that means either you have to, while you're seeing it and writing it and getting it out, then you have to be in remembrance of Allah. And then Allah can take that away from you and heal it. So what you're doing is you're getting it out and giving it back, rather than keeping it constricted and letting it fester.
So, go ahead.
So I have a question about like, okay, so we are talking about muhasaba, and you need to journal everything that's happened and try to reflect or see what I did, what I didn't do, what is the right, what was the wrong. Am I was mistaking this thing or like doing something wrong here? How can I avoid overthinking and over blaming myself and like being in the okay, this is the right way, or how can I do it in the right way? Because many of us blaming, okay, I will stay like 3 hours journaling and making muhasaba to myself about one day or about one situation or about one thing in my life. So how can I build on something between here and there? Where's the line between psychology and like Islam itself?
Part of it has to do with astaghfirullah alazim wa atubu ilayh. I think that's the key for our life story. As we go, we can't even estimate. It's very difficult to estimate what anything is, what it is, how to consider what we thought and did. And so there's always the need for constant istighfar.
Mm-hmm.
Let it go. Also, as you ask for pardon, as you said, as you're asking for pardon for anything, because you can't say what you're asking pardon for, but we ask pardon continuously and let it go. Let it go. Then we say other du'as. As we say other du'as invoking grace, then you receive the blessings and celebrate God's praise. So it's a living reality of utilizing these words that Allah has given us, these prayers. It's to make our life a life of prayer, in whatever form it's going to take. And we cannot be the judge of ourselves. We cannot judge our own actions. But it's always appropriate to say astaghfirullah alazim wa atubu ilayh and release, as you're saying. Release it. Then as we continue to praise Allah in the midst of the process of transformation, what can be wrong with that? How you can't blame yourself for that. It's what Allah said to do. And there's only blessing and peace that comes with that. But I think there's a lot of people who get very much caught up in self-blame, which takes a lot of energy and wastes a lot of time and imprisons us in false concepts of what we think we did. The better thing is to return back to Allah as soon as possible, to bow down in praise, let go of the idea and the manifestation of this idea in your mind. Let go of the mind itself. Go into the heart and let the heart be filled and refreshed with new dimensions of worship and love, instead of thinking about the mind, as Baba calls it, monkey mind, running around from one tree to another. Let it go. But he said actually tie it up. He said tie it up to one of the palm trees. It keeps running from one tree to another. So I think that has to be done. The mind has to be tied up, and then the heart must be freed to sing in praise of God. Let the song be sung, and let our gratitude be manifested step by step, for every blessing that's given, instead of evaluating ourselves continuously, blaming ourselves or anyone else. It's better to ask Allah to uplift our praise of Him.
I think on this point too, as a practical thing, a lot of people have a lot of trauma around guilt and shame, and a lot of it is tied in with how they were introduced to Allah and Islam. And so there's a lot of you're not good enough and you should be ashamed of yourself and you're lacking, and in order to be a good Muslim, this over there, it's this unattainable thing and you're not doing it and you need to be better. And so there's this shame built in, and this is not a reflection of Allah's reality or His teaching or the message in the Quran. So what we need to do is we need to go back to correcting our relationship to Allah and recognize that the very first name of the Asma al-Husna, the first two names that get repeated in every single surah except for one, is Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. So there are Jalali qualities of Allah, but the first, the fundamental, the foundational is always Rahmah. We come into this world through Rahmah. We come in through the womb, Rahm. This is the first way we come in, through mercy, and Allah, Nafas ar-Rahman, breathes into us this soul of, this breath of mercy. And so what we have to do is when we approach this work on taking ourselves into account, it has to be on the foundation of self-love and self-mercy. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck in this pathological nafs al-lawama, where it's just stuck in shaming yourself. And that's pathological, that's unhealthy, that's not a good thing when we just sort of constantly beat up on ourselves. That's not what lawama is. It's about taking yourself into account, and then you have to constantly go release and realize that, first of all, Allah has given you all of these things. So everything that you're struggling with has hikmah, and it was Allah that gave it to you, and you need to struggle with it. So there's nothing to be shamed about to begin with, and that you are worthy of being released from it. You know, and so you have to build all this on the foundation that your status as a human being is Khalifatullah, which means you have the same ruh that the Prophet ﷺ has. Your potential is this is why we have the Prophet ﷺ, is to show us the perfected example. We won't reach his exalted station, but that is he is there for us to emulate him, and his holiness, his sacred reality of his being is in the fact of his reflection of Allah's qualities, right? So Allah is these Asmaul Husna, but we have all of these same qualities inside of us. So you have to love and be merciful with yourself, and then take yourself into account based on the recognition that you are, Allah is Al-Wadud, and you are lovable.
Thank you.
It's just phenomenal that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put us in this place at this particular time. One of one of the writings that came to me this morning was about loving the self. And loving the self is not loving what in today's society is called the self. Right? Where you have to exalt the self. It's not that self.
Yes.
Because that self, when you exalt that self, actually you're belittling yourself. The self that we're talking about is the self that is of life. Loving that self that was given to us through the self that gives all selves their self. If that makes sense.
Yes. Exactly.
And finding that, so that repetitive cycle of, am I wasting time in this? Am I taking up too much time? If it takes me an hour, it takes me 2 hours, it takes me 3 hours, to get out of my heart what it is that whatever it is that's coming to me, it has to be exposed so that I can see it in its realness. I'm not wasting time. It's not a waste of time because you are working on yourself. And it may be, I don't know, Dr. Sheikha, if you would look at it as being a form of purification of that internal self, that that universal self that lies within, beyond those curtains.
Another point. La ilaha illallah is the very determination of one side to the other. So it's not just that we embrace everything within ourselves, but that we keep the zikr going, that discards what is unreal and keeps affirming more and more the reality. And if we don't do that, we can't just say everything is okay.
Right.
Because there's a process that's needed. And it's called purification, it's called discernment, and then transformation. So that's what has to keep going on.
There's like a method. There's a science to it, right? And it's takhliya and tahliya. So takhliya is the removal, just like the negation. We start with La ilaha illallah. We take out the idols from the Kaaba, and then we put in Allah. La ilaha illallah. So when you do dhikr, you're going, when people they say La ilaha, they're saying, negating over here, getting rid of La ilaha, take it out. And then you're affirming Allah in the heart. So La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah. So what we have to do is constantly be removing what is getting in the way of Allah being in our heart. And because there's always going to be something else appearing. That's the nature of the dunya and our humanity. It's like those, it just, that's why we have to stay constantly engaged. It's not like you say, okay, well, I took it out, it's all fine. It's going to reappear if you don't continue this process.
And we were created to do this.
Yes.
This is inherent in the creation process, and then in the transformation process. And we say, behold the signs of Allah. This is the beholding. It's to behold the process in which we make this discernment, in which we're learning what has to be discarded, how to let go of everything else but Allah. And this is the inherent plan that He bestowed upon us. That's why it's such a blessing to make this, keep doing it, and beseech His aid to awaken our true knowledge of it, and to transform us into the purity that He wishes us to be.
And it's why we shouldn't be afraid of facing our problems or our difficulties or the things that need to be purified, because those things are blessings, because they present opportunities to be needy of Allah. If you were to remove all of your problems and all of the things from your heart and just be in a state of blissfully witnessing Allah, eventually that would just become your state. But the sweetness of continually turning to Allah is you get to relive this pinnacle of sweetness, of recognizing your neediness and turning to Him. So the whole idea of tawbah, it means to turn. It's not about, oh, I did something wrong, I'm bad, and you're focusing on the bad, I'm bad. No, Allah has set this up for you to forget. Why? So that you can remember, because the remembering is the beauty, is the sweetness, is the point of your existence. So it's fine to be broken. It's fine to make mistakes. It's fine to, it's adi. It's normal. It's how it's supposed to be. And then you just embrace the continual tawbah, the turning, because it's the turning that is the step in the journey. Do we need to take a break for lunch?
And, I've been told the food has left the restaurant,
Oh, okay.
so it should be here probably in 5 minutes or so. We can start the break.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have one. What do you think Western psychology mainly misses about what you've been explaining so well?
A lot. But mainly, what it mainly misses? Well, I can break it down in a couple main points. The biggest one is what it misses is this idea of what he's saying, like that there is this other self. So what it's dealing with in psychology is the nafs, the separate self, the illusion of the experience of separateness. So my identity from birth to the present moment, and the reality of Islamic psychology, or this Islamic reality, is that we have a prenatal reality and identity and a post-mortem reality and identity. And so our trajectory of humanity is eternal. It's endless. And what regular psychology is, it's only looking at this little blip on that timeline or on that circle. And it's saying, okay, you were born and that's when you started, and then right now whenever you die, that will be the end. And we're only going to look at your social identities. Like who you are in this world, where were you born, what do you, and all of these sort of external identifications. And then we're going to try to make you feel better about them. And it's basically a science of, I wouldn't even call it a science, but of coping. Coping with what we don't even really understand. And then we're doing it from a perspective of like one blind man feeling an elephant, right? It's like, okay, well, it's about here. So we're going to deal with this tail, right? Meanwhile, there's this whole iceberg with this deeper reality of the spiritual unseen dimension that is completely ignored. So if we see that we started somewhere before this life and we're going to somewhere after, then it changes the whole notion of what it is we're even talking about in psychology. And then also, psychology is rooted in, for the most part, Cartesian dualism and materialism of like seeing everything as separate and disjointed. And so the body is just sort of insignificant because the identity is just thoughts, and the thoughts are in the brain, and we might as well just be sort of like brains in jars, right? But the reality is our self is a spiritual being first and foremost. We have a spiritual reality, and our physical experience. So there's a French philosopher that says we're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. That's what we're prioritizing and front loading, and recognizing that this is the reality of who we are. And so our psychology has nothing. The mind is only one small part of it. Mullah Sadra said that the body is a dense manifestation of the soul. This is just what the soul looks like in this dimension.
It's just phenomenal, this gathering here. There's so much a wealth of benefit here. And for those of us who are healing from trauma, right? The trauma isn't the end, but the trauma is necessary to get to that place where you see there is no end. that this life continues. I think it's a term, I don't know Arabic very well, but after our tarbiyah, after we learn these fundamental things, the fundamental things prepare us, as you said earlier, Doctor, they are the tools that actually begin to use us, I believe. Should we say it like that? That tool is the thing that our realization of the hawk begins to use us as opposed to us using it. But yet we use it to get to it. It's paradoxical.
It's paradoxical
Yeah.
and cyclical. Yeah.
Yes. But there is a break from that, because that in itself is the creator of the paradox. It's the creator of that secular motion that are like going like you explained it by going around the Kaaba. You know, and we're constantly going around the Kaaba until something else happens.
Yeah, we eventually have to transcend. Like, so we can do everything that we can to try to understand, figure out, change our behavior, do all of these sort of doings, but eventually the answer isn't going to come until we just are being. So we have to shift into being is the only place where you can fully be in submission. You can't think yourself into submission. You can think yourself into shifting into being. And that's where we need to get to is to transcend it. And then it doesn't, all of this, as long as you are transcending the separation, because whenever we're focused on anything other than Allah, it's either it's this and that. It's I'm trying to do that, or I'm trying to do this, or I'm understanding this, or I'm holding this and this together and trying to make sense of them, or I have to do this. And it's all, as soon as you're trying to figure anything out or understand anything, you're fundamentally not in a state of Islam. So in order to be fully submitted, it's going beyond the this or that and just being with the oneness, being submerged in Tawheed. And obviously, it's difficult to live like that in this world, but it's possible. We're made to be able to do that. This is what the Prophet was doing.
I have to go.
You're not going to stay for lunch?
No, I'm not eating.
Oh.
Thank you so much.
God bless you.
May Allah reward you all.
And you.
Thank you so much.
All of us.
Thanks for
together.
joining.
This is Hassan, our dear friend.
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. I wanted to mention something that the teaching about. He says the circle is completed and the spiral ascends. And this is the story of our life, step by step by step. The circle is completed. You realize that whatever you set out to do, there's a completion. But you don't stop there. Then it's in the spiral ascends to another maqam. And instead of blaming yourself for anything, you behold the signs of God, which is taking you from one step to another. And it's like, so something happened, let's say in your early days, but suddenly you realize that it's finished, and that includes traumas.
Yeah.
The trauma is, you got it, you figured it out, it's completed now. and then the spiral ascends into another level
Like
of
a-
consciousness where
Yeah.
you're actually free of that.
Yeah.
We can be freed of the unhealed traumas by allowing this ascension to take place, and that comes through completion of the realization. We see that happened. Alhamdulillah. Now it's time to ascend, as Allah wills. Not that we could make that happen, but there are times in our life where we just feel that we're being
You're free from it.
liberated
Yeah.
from something, and I pray for that. I don't think we should keep reiterating the unhealed trauma instead of saying, time is up now. Let's move on. Let's let it go. Mostly it's something that happened in the world. Someone else, some intergenerational trauma was projected. Instead of thinking that trauma is such an important thing, as you behold the sign, recognize when it's time to let it go. That it wasn't real, but it held you hostage for a long enough time. Now, let's see what happens after that. When that's just, just let go.
So the release of the trauma that you both are talking about, is there a way that we could incorporate that, like a tangible way, like have advice of incorporating that into our lives daily? So like at the end of Salah or like in the morning after we wake up, is there a way to, like, is that something, because Western psychology obviously has a concept of like doing a quick meditation. Does that apply here? Like doing a quick, or would that be, so.
It's not necessarily quick, it's real. It's saying, I recognize that I don't need this. I don't need to carry this weight around.
Mm.
It's been here too long and it's not real. It's not real. It's illusory. Most of these things, these so-called traumas, they're not real. It's just was projected from someone else who was carrying it around. It's like a pattern, a satanic pattern that keeps projecting trauma, and imprisoning people in absolutely false concepts that there's so much to, and so we're bound up in this. We don't have to be. We can be liberated at any time. And one of the ways to do it is by doing the kalima, manifesting it clearly and definitively. So when you're facing a trauma, say the kalima with deep intentionality to say, this, O Allah, if it is time for this to depart, let it go. Let it go. And then that's how we spiritually evolve and become liberated. So I think that part of this process is liberation. It's an intentional liberation from false concepts that have been holding us hostage.
One sort of practical technique, I suppose, that you can do is because the key is to release it, but not release it so that it's just out and re-traumatized. It's giving it back to Allah, recognizing that Allah is going to take it from you. So
Yes.
it's very different than when people say a cathartic release. That's not helpful. That's just experiencing the trauma again, and then where does it go? It has to get absorbed into the one. So what you have to do, what I would recommend, is integrating that belief and experience with a physical action and integrating all those together. So it could be as simple as when you're in prayer and you're in sujood and your head is on the ground, you're asking Allah to take away the thing from you, believing that Allah can take it away from you, and believing that Allah can absorb it, and then physically letting it out of your head into the ground through the rug. So you're manifesting a physical release and syncing that with the cognitive notion, the aqidah of Allah can take this from me. And so you're giving it to Him. And then you can also, so that's a physical thing. You have to connect it with a physical release. But then you can also do that same thing while you do some sort of exercise that is releasing. So like something where you're sort of, your adrenaline is coming and you're sweating because we release toxins from our cells, and you can literally release this satanic pattern from your sweat. But you have to sync the consciousness and the belief and recognition that Allah can take it from you with the physical activity.
If I may add, like I also, as person where I feel like what helped me is that to also know whatever trauma is there, it's not in vain and it's not purposeless, and there's good in it even in that. And so I'm just kind of knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the perfect timing and He heals and He can when everything wills and wants.
Right.
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Yes. Alaikum salam.
Pardon the interruption.
No, you were perfect timing.
MashaAllah.